Well, we're in. Hope you guys liked that little twist I did to the usual Novatone intro. Really want to make this feel special, and I think we're succeeding at it so far. It's also the first time I'm live this late. It's just over 11 p.m. where I live, so why don't we get this started? Let's go. Hello there. Welcome everyone to this Novatone Spotlight event. Some of you already know me, but I'll formally introduce myself anyway. My name is Paul, aka Modus. I'm an electronic music artist from Spain. I've been making music since 2014. I've released songs in all kinds of labels, Rushdown, Exobolt, O4, just to name a few. I've played live sets in places like Excalibur Fest, run by part of the Monster Cat team, and I also do my own live streams on Twitch every Friday at 5:30 p.m. GMT. That means this format isn't totally new to me, but in some ways it is, not only because this isn't Twitch, but also because I rarely get to talk about these things, the topics that I'm going to cover, in my own live streams. So after that, one might think, dude, this guy's been everywhere, but all that had an origin, a starting point, and you know what I mean by that. I've been a long-time member of the server. Back when it was called Elevate, you heard of that. I've been here for a few years now, and when Ambi asked me to take part on this spotlight, I couldn't think of a better way to go back to my roots and share some of the knowledge I picked up along the way with you all guys. So while in the previous episode of the spotlight, you've seen some of the nitty-gritty of sound design, wavetables, and very advanced stuff, some of it I'm not even qualified to teach about, I thought I'd take this moment to delve deeper into the more subjective, almost abstract side of things. One that might not be entirely obvious at first, but once you get the gist of it, the quality of your composition is likely to be positively affected. I'll be the first to admit, I don't have the craziest sound design out there, but a good theory background can help you work around those issues and eventually tackle them head on. So I've prepared a series of topics that I'm going to cover in this live stream, or at least focus on, and those are, first, a case study of my own style, how I make my music sound the way it does, and why you can recognize it at first listen, how to keep balance between repetition and stagnation. One might feel like they have to adapt themselves to what the masses like in order to appeal to a bigger audience, but I'm going to prove to you that with the right tools, that's not always the case. God, I sound like an Instagram ad. And this ties in with my second point of the session, narrative in music. Xylent said in a podcast a while back that every song needs a story. And not only do I completely agree with that, but I'm going to take it a step further and say every song is a story, building this universe of soundscapes and making it all fit into a global narrative that uses no words. It's a very, very strong asset to have. Right? Because people love stories and they love music as well. Whenever you find someone on the street that says, I don't like music, they're lying, because rhythm is one of the oldest forms of entertainment dating as far back as human prehistory. And if you can find a way to mix the two, you got yourself a very powerful recipe. And I'll be explaining all of this while I do a project breakdown of a song I released late last year called Over Me, part of the Rushdown Color Base Volume 1 compilation. If you heard it and you liked it, you're in luck, because we're going to dive into its inner workings and how it was composed from start to finish. So while it might not be as long as last week's spotlight, I'm still confident you'll be able to make something out of this. Feel free to ask me any questions along the way in chat. I'll try to reply to as many of them as I can. And without any further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so before we move on with this thing, let's read what I missed in chat, because I usually do this in my own streams. So yeah, Intrex is here. That is really glad to see you here. Sounds promising. Yeah, title sounds indeed promising. I just hope I can explain myself well enough. Hello, welcome to a new YouTube video. Today we're gonna Mutsus and hit like and subscribe for more Mutsus content. Yeah, that's exactly how I talk here. Sig. Wow, Intrex is here indeed. Monkus timer. Yeah, it's a very similar timer to what I did with the NYP5 countdown ARG. More on that later. TikTok. Indeed. Say, I wonder if Interax would ever be interested in doing one of these. I would watch that. This intro is so sick. Well, I've got better visuals, even better visuals in my own Twitch live streams. So if you want to see more of that, as well as 3 hours of me being dumb, so why don't you come over one of these Fridays at 5:30 p.m. GMT? I am very scared. Indeed, that timer is very scary. Here we go. Yes, 11 p.m. I am also tired. Hello, the guy. Modus stream, indeed. Who's Elevate? I don't know, but they like to ascend from what I heard. Elevate? I hardly know her. Yeah, indeed. Haha. How do you spell Modus? That's M-O-D-U-S. Yeah. Yeah, and there's all sorts of creative ways to spell Modus. But yeah, lots of conflicting responses, indeed. Rhythm story. Rhythm, the saga. Yeah, especially when I do everything but rhythm. They are lying. Modus has some of the best visuals around stream-wise. Thank you, Novatone. Modus still not organized. What do you mean? I'm color coding shit. Look at this. I'm organizing this in patterns and clips. Then there's a whole track dedicated to just sidechain. There's a whole track dedicated to just rebalancing the volume on the master. And then below that is all the automation. What the fuck do you mean by I'm still not organized? Have you not seen my most recent streams? Yeah, let's keep chatting so Paul can never start. Infinite intro. Yeah. So, guys, that being said, welcome to FL Studio once again. This is Over Me, 140 BPM, E minor. You've already seen this because it's already out as a free download on Rushdown's Color Base Volume 1 compilation. So, yeah, this is on Rushdown, and it's nice. And we'll try to break it down because I think this serves as a perfect example for the topics I'm going to cover in the stream, or at least try to, because I need to fill at least 1 hour with this content. So let's try our best. Switch to Windows Movie Maker when that's tomorrow. Yeah, that's more organized than my project, honestly. Demonetized. Well, yeah, content ID is a thing. What can you do? All right, so you guys might be wondering what this sounds like in its well, finished state. And let me tell you that there's only one way to find out. Love you too, Darcy. Real, welcome. No feedback hour tonight. All right. So, Riel, if you're wondering why I'm on YouTube, you might be noticing that this isn't my YouTube channel. I'm streaming from Novatone's YouTube channel, which means that this is a one-off. This is not going to be like a weekly thing. This is just going to be me explain this in one night. So yeah, and not only is this a different kind of project breakdown, but I haven't actually done any project breakdown for Over Me. The only thing I did on stream was actually work on it. I didn't do a project breakdown because this song released so late into December that I had already stopped streaming by then to wait for NYP5. So I never did a live project breakdown of this. So this is the first time that you are seeing the project in full. And yeah, he's actually going to slowly break it down and delete it over the course of the hour. Yeah, like we can do it now if you want. Yeah. Imagine Ctrl-Z didn't work and I did go ahead and delete the entire track. How about that? All right, after that breakdown, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and explain the elements of my style in general. So, for example, what makes my music sound like me is, first of all, a series of finally, we are like, what, 17 minutes in, and only now are we really starting to see the actual content of this. All right. So, what makes my style my style? So first of all, there's a series of elements that I use in pretty much every track of mine, right? And maybe the most important is my super sauce, right? My signature super sauce. Now, I have this patch over here. Well, in this case, it has a flanger in there. This one does not, but I'm gonna need, yeah, for it not to mute. In this case, it has reverb. Without reverb, it sounds like this. Right now, it has a bit of a high-end boost, but what this is just a preset in Silent 1. This is Chill Pad. A little bit redundant, but you know. So I've been using this patch pretty much since 2018, or even further back. Like, the first time you can hear this was like probably one of my 2016 songs, but I didn't really start using it religiously in every track until, as I said, like 2017, end of 2017, start of 2018. That's when I really got started with this sound as a whole. And then we also have some other things, like, for example, basic waves, arps, and melodies. Now, what do I mean by that? It means like arps and melodies, but done with like very basics sound waves, not sine waves. So in this case, for example, this arp right here, it's nothing more than a 3x oscillator patch, 2 saw waves 1 octave apart and with very short decay. And then they have some disperser, which is also a very recurring thing that I do. I throw this pretty much at every sound because it makes it sound a little bit like smoother, but in a like smoother but sharper. I have no way of like. Makes the transients go a little bit more snappy, but in its own weird, watery kind of way. It's hard to explain. So according to Kilohertz, it disperses the transients, but that is word salad. So yeah, those are a few things that I use. I also use, as you've seen in this track quite heavily, a lot of piano. In this case, I've used addictive keys, which is what I've been using very recently. I used to use Alicia's keys on Contact, but I've since switched to addictive keys because it came free with my Focusrite Scarlett audio interface. So I bought it, and then it came free with addictive keys. So it was like, wow, I might as well pick this up because it sounds pretty damn good. And it is right here. It's addictive keys. I did do some customization to the Studio Grand preset. But yeah, this is a very powerful like piano library because it has a ton of presets. It has a ton of like piano sounds. Like it's not just this one sound, right? And well, then I had to boost the highs quite heavily because they came pretty tamed from right out of the box. Without any EQ, they sound like this. Which, yeah, maybe that may sound accurate when in the recording, but this just makes it sound brighter and more like electronic-ish instead of like you're in a piano concert of sorts. But yeah, there's one very important thing that I also use, and that is reverb swells. So you guys might, and especially those of you who are who have been watching my Twitch live streams as of recently, you might have seen this huge automation that says Toraburb sidechain FX. Well, first of all, I love Toraburb, especially the first version. The second version I didn't really enjoy that much because it sounded a bit more generic. But the first one has this like very, very unique space-ish sound to it, right? So let's take one of these supersaw leads, for example, right? And let's solo this. Without reverb, it sounds pretty, well, supersaw. With reverb, it sounds a lot more like spacey and with a wider soundstage. Well, I mean, that's what reverb does. But it does add its kind of like uniqueness to it. It's not just one more reverb. It has its unique sound. And yes, that's Immunity and Bounty preset, but I did tweak the pre-delay and the crossfader a little bit. But yeah, it does add this like a very echoey, spacey sound to it. Well, I've said that a million times by now. I sound like a broken record, but yeah, I've also been using recently an instance of Razor in all my tracks. Why? Well, because of the sound that you're about to hear. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. This is the typical AU5 Razor, right? But taken to a whole new level. Instead being used as a mid bass layer for the supersaws. Right. And I've also been using frequency shifting. For example, you might have heard in the build-up that it goes down like, ooh, right? And that is due to a frequency shifter that is here. Basically what it does is it shifts all of the individual frequencies in a sample by the exact same amount. So for example, when you pitch up an octave, the fundamental is raised by X, but the second harmonic is raised by a little bit less and less and less and less and less and less. And when you get to the final harmonic, which in reality there is no final harmonic, they are pretty much infinite. But yeah, they are, instead with this, they are shifted all by the same amount. So the fundamental is shifted by 5 Hertz. The second harmonic is also shifted by 5 Hertz. For example, if I were to set this to 5, right? And in this case, I'm just doing an automation down. Well, I mean, not in that bar. Just to make it sound a little bit more chaotic and like, give it that futuristic-ish vibe, like a malfunctioning device from the future or something like that. There's also something that in this case I haven't used because I try to do like my own effects. But there's this plugin called Endless Smile. It's like a one knob does it all thing, right? So you turn it up and it has reverb, delay, and all sorts of effects built into a single knob. So it's very easy to make build-ups with that. But this is not supposed to be a promo stunt, right? So after I've explained that, well, we can say that my style is a combination of like very futuristic sounds with jazzy piano breakdowns and reverb swells and Razor. So yeah, that's more or less the kinds of recurring sounds that I've been using throughout my music my career. right? And that I've been working on over the course of the past few years. But now let's go for a more technical breakdown. Let's go for the processing, the effects, sound design, etc. And then we will get to the nitty-gritty of the stuff that I'm going to cover in this very stream. So I'll try to be brief. These are some chords that I layered, and then I rendered them. So I bounced them after the fact, and then I had some EQ to get rid of the like very high sine frequencies that were in there. So if you listen to the original without EQ, you can hear like they have some like very high frequencies in there that sound a little bit ear piercing, right? With this, a notch filter gets rid of all that. As you can see, these two are being suppressed. So it sounds a little bit less like I'm trying to rape your ear. But so yeah, and then I have a very slight OTT and some further EQing to further get rid of all the like individual notches in there. And then there's another instance for this. Right, for this deep pad, which is also one of the things I've been using a lot in my tracks, is this detuned saw wave, like detuned saw breeze, right? Which is just a saw wave with detuned, a low pass, and then some compression, and then low pass filter to get rid of the like those harmonics. So this is like a very like low sort of stereo, more wider bass, right? For the intro, the build up, and pretty much everything that's not the drop uses this bass instead. And then we have some of the vocals being teased in here. We'll get to this later. Then we have some more layers, which are high-passed to hell and beyond. Then we have the drums. Someone in Discord asked me about how the kick was processed. Well, there's actually not that much. It's just a low pass and a bell in the 380s to get rid of some of the boxiness in there. So it sounds a little bit like softer, right? But this kick, the actual sample, it's actually being faded out a tiny bit. This comes from a sample pack I've been making over the last few months. It's called Supernova, and it will actually come out next month. So you guys should be ready for that. It has over 2 gigabytes of sounds for you to use, including ARP spaces, bonus stuff, drums, effects, keys and leads, super saws, superverbs, and all that cool stuff. But as I said at the beginning, this is not a promo stunt, right? So let's move on. We do have some hi-hats from Xylent, because I love those. Supernova. Some part of that name sounds familiar. Yeah, Nova. I aim to please. It's all coming together. It is all part of my master plan to dominate the world. And then, as you can see, here is the reverb swells coming into effect. So without these, it would sound like this. So as you can see here, let me pull that up. Watch this knob, the effects knob. As you can see, it's going up very shortly. And that helps make some airiness, right? And fill out the gaps without actually adding any more elements. And that is a very easy way to fill out some of the gaps. That's why I've been recommending almost everyone who signs up for my feedback hour in my Friday streams that you should probably use reverb swells more, because they are a very, very easy way to make your track sound more full without actually adding anything. Of course I dry wet automate this thing, Surreal, of course. Then let's get to, let's move on a bit. I've already explained what these ARPs are made of. Then the supersaws are slowly coming in with this filtered cutoff automation. They do have a bit of a Q factor in there. So I bring that up when the right moment comes, as you can see. So you get that like that like whoosh sort of effect, right? It's very close to clipping, but you know, if it doesn't clip in the master, it's not clipping. Teasing the vocals a little bit. Some tom fills here and there, also from my sample pack. Wood block snare with a ton of reverb. Yeah, dimension expander, some EQ, and then Pro R. Right, and now let's move on to the build-up. A lot of this stuff is bounced because this was made in my old PC. Right now I've got a Ryzen, but in 2019 I had a 4th gen i7, right? And 8 gigs of RAM. So I had 4 times less the RAM I have right now. Right now I've got 32. So I had to bounce a lot of this because it just kept freezing. But this piano is also from Addictive Keys. And then this is layered with Music Box. And it sounds pretty damn cool. This is all helped by huge amounts of reverb once again, some delay as well, and add some OTT, another Pro R for the Music Box. I am noticing that talk about sidechain on sidechaining on FL, and yes, I do use Fruity Balance now for that. In fact, I actually used to use the mixer, but as you guys are seeing, the mixer has volume smoothing for some reason, and so like when you suddenly mute all the volume, it doesn't mute immediately. It takes a little while for it to go off. So yeah, that's why I've been using Fruity Balance. It's a lot more accurate, a lot more precise, and it cuts off immediately instead of giving that like soft fade out, right? And it is real useful, yeah. So the deep pad is the exact same as the previous as the intro. Then we are getting to the supersaw chords, which also have a lot of reverb. Once again, this is all part of like very general bus that just has a tiny bit of reverb, so everything sounds like very, very wet and wide. Because, well, that's what the build-up is supposed to sound like, this very like, atmospheric, spacey thing. Dude, is it cold? It's actually been pretty cool in temperature on this night. We haven't reached 30°C in a couple days. We are sitting at like 20 right now, so it's actually not that bad for May anyway. I'm just waiting for Spain to reach 50°C in the next 2 years or so. Like we have reached 48 already, and I had to go through that. I'm seeing 50, like. It's just going to happen. Is there a Logic Pro X equivalent of Fruity Balance? I actually have no idea because, well, first of all, I've never owned a Mac, but I have used a Hackintosh build for a while, and I actually can't really tell because I've only really tried it for a few minutes. So, yeah, it's not like I can say anything about that for Logic. And this is just the same instance of the supersaw, but instead doing a single note, and this is louder than the chords, so it acts as a lead. And then a flanger comes in. Then we have another pad. This is actually exclusive to this section. Logic Pro can be very powerful. Chime uses it. Like, yeah, I would say the mediocre DAW would be that. GarageBand. And then there's an additional bell tree layer to this. Well, this is from AU5, and it does have some panning here and there. Right, and then there's some noise effects with a long reverb clap. Very like cinematic hit. Right? And then we slowly build up. Here's a very easy way to go from a very atmospheric section to a very groovy first drop. It might seem like an impossible thing to get to. After all, from this to this, there's a long way, and I've only really done two things to this. First of all, I've turned the very steady chords. So I'm going to solo all of this. Let's see. Right. And then here's a trans gate. Right. What this does is it's basically a gating effect. So right now it's off, but it will start slowly coming in. And it will go from this very steady atmospheric thing to be very stabby. Right, so this already adds a lot of the groove in and sets it up for the first drop. Not only that, but I also have the frequency shifter I've already explained, which makes it sound all the more chaotic, right? So it goes from atmosphere to stabs. It goes down. And then this hat helps you set this up. So it sets up the tempo. So it makes you know that it's going to be like this, right? And you instantly pick up the groove, right? So let's tackle the main bass from this. It's not actually that difficult. This is just a detuned square with a low pass automation linked to this LFO. A bit of a short decay. Then some distortion. Well, this one is actually off. Multi-band compression. And a bit of a filter. Not much, actually. It does add a tiny bit of brightness back. But the most important thing about this is this very, very short reverb. Now, reverb in this case is not actually being used to simulate a room, but rather to shape the sound that's coming into it. So if we turn this off, you'll see it sounds a lot more like a detuned square. And now if we turn that on, it sounds like a lot more all around you, right? Like it's no longer completely in the center. That added with the sub bass, you know, your typical sine plus square. A very good top loop. Also with a fair share of very short reverb. Without the reverb, it sounds like this. Bit too dry. So here it gives it a bit more space. And it actually makes room in the center for the vocals. Completely in the center, very in your face. And then in the gaps where there are no vocals, I'm introducing reverb and delay. Right? And then it all adds up. The snare was actually made from 2 layers. One of them is the same wood block layer that I used here in the intro, but here it's a little bit more dry, and there's some water foley involved as well. So there's this contrast between what's at the center, which is the sub bass and the vocals, and then what's a little bit more spread out, that's the top loop and the main stab. And then for the second half, I'm adding a fifth, which is done with a sine, D blue crusher, then I'm adding one more reese with a steady note instead of just going chops. And then I'm adding a few more layers here and there, such as this, which I've already used here in the intro and build-up. So it sounds kind of familiar already. And this will tie in with my next section about the composition of this. And here I've even added a razor. There's not a whole lot very like sound design-ish about this part. I'm going to explain this a lot more in depth in the composition and narrative parts. So let's just skip it for now. It's a more 4 on the floor part. A more groovy. My lord, the pattern name says, yeah, it is called You Like Jazz. Well, for some reason, the reverb is now at 100%. We will hear this piano solo in full after this more technical project breakdown. So here's more jumping around in octaves, more groovy. And it's helping to prep up the second job, which is a lot more energetic. Again, teasing the vocals. This time we're going straight into the drop. Huge part right here. This is the super saw layer I've been speaking about. And here here one more flanger comes in. Then here's the razor. And the sub bass, which is actually the detuned pad, but with more higher end harmonics, and together it all sounds like this. And with the lead, which is actually resampled from a one-shot, I believe, yeah. Also from my upcoming Supernova sample pack, but in this case it's doing 2 octaves. Right? And this, added with all this, Already sounds pretty cool, but we still are not done yet. We still have another arp to get in. Again, this is just a square wave with reverb. This is not that complex. That's just a square wave with very short decay and another EQ and some more delay. That's pretty much about it. And it's going really fast, and it's going to pan around a tiny bit, so it's just going a bit wider. But still taking into account the imaging of this. We have to take into account that this cannot go out of phase. We cannot afford for this to redline here, right? So it still has to stay with it still has to stay within this 45-degree area, right? So like a baseball field, right? This is your baseball field, right? And it has to stay in that baseball field. It cannot go out of bounds. That's the thing. And then there's another layer here. And together it all sounds like this. Then with that more powerful snare here, which is actually just a layer of 2 AU5 snares, I believe. This was later resampled in Edison, which has a little bit of reverb to make the tail a little bit longer, more noisy, right? And then there's this crash, which also adds a little bit of brightness and high end to the whole layer. And that's that. Reverb swells also coming in here at some points. This is just the piano solo, but with 4 on-the-floor drums. Another layer of various AU5 snares. Right, and the outro, which is just the exact same as the intro, but with a few twists here and there. I'll explain them more in depth once we get to the composition part of it, which should be pretty soon, aka right now. So let us bring up my list of bullet points right here. All right, so now it's time for a more in-depth composition breakdown. So, okay, the main theme I tried to make this track from was love. Mostly because, well, that's what the vocals talk about, but also because this track tells the story of a constant search for love. The first drop makes this clear by saying, love took over me, watching me can see through me gradually. So this fictional character, if you will, is just finding out about love right now and is trying to describe it, but can't quite show it to the world just yet. And when he or she finally finds a way to do it, all of that gets released in a massive blast. So with that in mind, let's dive into some of the things that help carry that narrative without making you tune out 10 seconds in. So, right off the bat, this track is E minor, but we're not starting in E minor. We are starting with the 4th, which is A. That already creates some tension. This is, whoa, this is supposed to be E minor, but this guy's not starting in E minor. Something weird's about to happen. This is gonna be interesting. And that, along with this groove of like offbeat chords. But in fact, the beat should be. Right? That instantly sets up a groove and a rhythm in your mind that you just can't get out of your mind, right? And that is further helped by this deep pad right here, which is actually playing when the chords are not. So when this chord is not playing, this deep pad is, right? Same applies here. Same applies here. right? Same applies there and there. So whenever the chords are not playing, there's always something to fill in that space. So it makes for this like very, very good feeling of groove, right? And here we are already starting to tease one of the main elements of this track, which is the vocals. So here you still don't know what the track is going to be about, right? That is mostly going to be known in the build-up. But here we can already hear some phrases like watching me, can see through me, gradually, right? And here we are switching to C minor to give it sort of a happy feeling before jumping into the like very huge atmospheric stuff, right? Now you will notice that these vocals are doing notes that are not the same as the notes featured in the first drop. So here, this one is doing D and then E, right? But here in this drop, it's doing G and then A, right? It's the same jump. It's one tone apart, but it's in a different place. So while here we end, the Mi is sung in an E, right? Which is the third of C major. So this syllable helps the next section tie in better with what came previously. So we're linking those two parts together. And here we are doing the exact same. We're using these vocals. The Mi ends in a D this time, which is the fifth of G major, which is the next chord that we're playing. So it helps tie in from one chord to the next. And here's a thing, the gradually ends in a B. Right? But this is A minor. B is the ninth of A minor, but here's the thing. A minor is part of the E minor key, right? It's one of the chords, one of the triad chords that makes up the E minor chord. So it shouldn't be sounding that tense. However, by adding this seventh or ninth, we can already create tension in chords where tension is not supposed to happen. So it creates this sense of uncertainty, right? Bye, Serial. Have a great night. And here we are doing a seventh in this case, which is actually going up from this F sharp of D major, which this is actually hinting that this should be E minor instead. And let's try that. But it's actually A. So it's actually like E minor over A. And then here it's the exact same thing, but with the notes switched up and the rhythm as well switched up just a little bit. And we got this huge sub drop going into this 2-beat pause. So this pause helps you set up the next part, right? So it serves as a very easy bridge, and you will see me using this 2-beat pause in a lot of sections in this song. For example, you will see me use it right before the breakdown. There's that pause again, right? And here once again. And again, going into the second drop. In fact, here it's being done twice. Here is to get introduced into the actual start of the second drop, and here it's actually being used to set up the supersaw layer. Right? And here I'm actually doing the exact same. So here I'm doing a tape stop. So this 2-beat pause is very important because it's recurring. It happens pretty much every time before every section, right? So it's all about these like very, very small details that you don't notice right off the bat, but your brain is constantly thinking about them subconsciously. Like this has some elements here and there is that repeat each other, but it doesn't really get that old, right? It doesn't fall into stagnation. God's Warrior, welcome. So, going into the build-up, we are introduced to the first major main motif. And why is it important to have motifs? Because these are going to be the most memorable part of your song, right? And if you want this to be memorable, you have to repeat it at some point. The thing about this motif is that no matter where it's being played, it's always being played by a main instrument in that section. So here, the main element is the piano and the music box layer, right? So that is the main element that stands out the most right now, with the background layers being the vocals and all the rest of the supersauce, right? But here in the next 8 bars of this build-up, the piano and the vocals are actually going to switch roles, and then the vocals are going to become the main element. Suddenly you hear the "so easily" very, very, very in your face, in front, right? With the piano going into more of a secondary role. The track is already out. It is part of Rushdown Color Bass Volume 1 compilation. It is called Over Me. Check it out. It is Modus. Over Me. All right. So this suddenly takes out all the reverb and it becomes the main element that you hear in front. So while here the piano was the main thing, now it's the vocals. Why? Because I'm going to tease these vocals being the main element and actually use it in the first drop. So here they become the main element, and this is further done in the first drop. Because the vocals are the first thing that you hear in the mix, right? Very, very in the center, loud, in your face. So it's very important to know what is your lead element at all times, because that is going to help you make a lot of better choices when it comes to music. Why should I care about this element more than the other, right? And here, this is the main motif right now, the very like spaced apart vocals. And then here, once again with different lyrics, it's the same melody with different lyrics. And then here, 1/5 down. So here, feel free to be creative. And then here, I'm doing the exact same vocals, but now they are more in the background, right? Because the main element has now become the step plug. Why? Because now it's doing a lot more octaves, and it's playing around a lot more. It's jumping around a lot more. So this has now become more important than the vocals, right? So it's time for the vocals to fade into a secondary role. That's why I bring them an octave down. And then here, instead of G-A, which made for a more dissonant, jazzy feeling thing, this feels more resolved because it actually ends in E, which is the root key, and the chord that's playing right here. So this is just E. There's no weird jazzy notes being played here. There's just E. Same thing there. So this feels a lot more resolved, right? Because we're nearing the end of the drop. Then I come back up here. Then this suddenly fade down, and then here comes the breakdown. Now, in this breakdown, you might have noticed that that alongside the piano, there's these elements right here. And if these sound familiar, it's because they are from the intro. They're just being spaced out a little bit more. With a different twist here and there. And in those gaps, I'm just making piano shenanigans. And then some chromatic movements. Feel free to be creative here. Let's take out the reverb, please. Thank you, FL. Now, this is a very important thing about doing piano solos or just anything piano related in an electronic song. Notice how the velocities here are all over the place. Now, piano is an instrument that is played by humans. It's not played by a computer. What does this mean? A human, when playing the piano, has what's called expression. This is, well, a PC is going to play the piano at exactly the same time, so very, very quantized, and with exactly the same velocity in every single hit, because it has a grid and it's a computer. It doesn't understand about emotions. So how to convey emotion with the digital instruments? By humanizing this a little bit more, you can see here that I have offset some of these notes from the grid. So while these two should hit like this D, I've offset them a little bit more so it sounds a little bit more like an actual human hand is playing those chords. So it's not entirely everything in time, right? Same thing here. It's not all the same length. It's not all the same timing, and it does have its shenanigans with velocity here and there. So it's important to know which notes are supposed to be your leading notes. So here, these are the powerful notes, and for this to feel more like an arpeggio, I'm doing this glide up in the velocity, because if I did it very uniformly like this, suddenly that sounds a little bit more off-putting to me. And if we do it a bit more like faded in, right? Suddenly it feels a lot more groovy. Here we are introduced to another melody cell, which is also going to be repeated later on. And here, this is a very, very fancy version of a lick. The very fancy version of a lick. And then here I just went full Jacob Collier, and well, why not? Let's just make a very, very long chromatic movement. And this is used in order to end up in the same chord as the beginning. It ends up in the same chord. But here, in the second part of this breakdown, while in the first part we did the same chords here twice, and then here the same, right? Here we are doing A and then B. This is getting more jazzy, right? And then here I'm doing the same little cell thing here. I'm doing this an octave up. So it's exactly the same note, but it has a different feeling because it's an octave up. It doesn't sound entirely the same. Here I'm doing another different movement. So while here I was just doing full semitones down. Chromaticisms, if that's the way you call it in English. I know how you say it in Spanish, but I have no way how you say it in English. Chromaticisms? And then here I just went A, G, C. This is the same melody from here. But here we ended in E, which is the root key. In this case, we are ending in C sharp, which this is C sharp minor. The E is a minor third, and this gets even jazzier because C sharp is actually not a part of the natural like E minor key. So this is a strange chord, you might call it. So this chord makes sense, but it makes sense outside of the E minor meaning, right? But here we have found a way to fit it in, make it sound a lot more jazzy and different. And here we're finally finding a way to bridge from that it's a passing chord indeed. And here we are finding a way to bridge from the more jazzy and, not so classical sounding type of stuff. So we are finding a way to go back into the main scale. So we are going into C major with seventh, major seventh. And here we are doing a lot of reverb. And here I've tried what's called a canon. This thing has been used in classical music pretty much since the 17th century. And what this does is one melody is being played at, normally. But then you have another version of the exact same melody. In my case, I did it full octave up, but one full bar off. So here. So there, it's more like a call and response effect, right? So it's going like. So they're calling and responding to each other, right? But we're still with the main motif of the song, which is what the vocals are doing. And here we're adding more tension. This is an E chord here. But here we have added another C sharp, which is reminiscent of the piano solo we did. But now, instead of being a bass note, now it is part of the chord itself. And it is a passing note to the actual seventh. And this is another thing that I really like doing. So here, what I did was one section or part of the note goes down in semitones, right? And the other one goes up. So it makes for this very neutral sounding stuff. It's not really major nor minor, it just sounds very jazz. You don't really know that it's going to resolve because we still are not done yet. And we're building up once again. And here we're coming back to the concept of the pre-build-up thing, which is this. But with a few twists. While here it was just chords and one arp. Here we have actually assigned the arp its own melody. Well, thanks FL for that. So this, right? And the supersaws are actually doing the exact same thing. And here we are doing another very like small melody cell, which is done with the music box. And then another hit here to set up the second drop. Wait for it, there you go. And this is where it all adds up, it all comes together, because where have you seen this melody before? Let's go back, shall we? Well, thanks FL for that. You know, the perks of being live. It all adds up, right? But wait, there's more. Where have you heard that? And as I said, it is still being done by the main instrument, the main lead, which in this case it's the piano, and here is the synth lead. So we've already established a relationship between which motifs go with each section of instruments, right? So here the main melodies go with the main leads. And here, let's go. Motifs are a very powerful tool, yeah. And then here is the second version of the piano solo. Now this, you might notice that this has a lot more powerful velocity, so a lot stronger. It has a very steep high-end boost, but since these are all being tamed by the sidechain, hold on, let's listen to that. A lot of those like very ear-rapey, like high-end hits are actually being sidechained out, so it's not that much of a deal, that much of an issue. But here, when you do play it on its own, it does get kind of annoying. But the most important thing is that it sounds well in context, so this doesn't actually really matter. Here, we're doing a different rhythm. So here, while we did this, here we're waiting a little bit more, just a tiny bit more, right? So it's a bit of a change in rhythm. The notes are the exact same once again. It's just that very small detail that helps it not get old, right? It doesn't get stagnated. It feels repetitive, but in a good way. This is sort of the same. And just when you think this is the exact same, this is just a copy-paste of the piano solo, here I'm going even further up with a bit of variation in that melody. So that makes it change a whole lot, and it makes you think, whoa, I thought this guy was gonna make a copy-paste, but he didn't. That's bonus points for you. So when we came here in the first time, remember that we ended up in C sharp? But since here we are actually reaching the end, that's not a problem anymore. We can just end in E because we have reached the end. So this is just a way to tell you, it's over. We have reached E. We have reached the root chord finally and decisively. It's the end. Simply E. And the outro, the song ends the same way it started, so it makes for this kind of like loopable thing. But here, since this is the end, I want to make it very clear that this is going to end. So what am I doing? I'm taking some stuff out. So while we start the exact same as the intro, I'm slowly starting to take stuff out. For example, in the final 8 bars, the bass is now gone. And here, one more layer gone. And here, one more layer gone. And you finally end with just one layer, and then when that goes, total silence, end of the story, right? And that's sort of the composition that went into making Over Me. Now that we've examined all that in detail, like a very in-depth, let's explain some more examples of cross-track motifs, because this is all one track. But what if you're making an LP? Right? You also have to create a story within your LP or EP. So in my case, let's see, for example, what I did with No Limits, the first and for the time being only LP that I have out right now. So here is the first song from it. This is called Take Off. And here we can already see a few melodies that are going to appear in the next few songs. Like here. That is going to appear later on here. And then here. Another one. And that motif is not just going to apply for that song, because then we have No Limits, the titular track of the LP, which has the same motif, but in a secondary, like bell thing. There it is. So it goes on not just in one track, but across multiple tracks, because it's the same LP. It all has to fit in context. An LP cannot be separate tracks. It all has to make sense as a whole. Let's move on into the third track. And this has, for example, here in the breakdown. Listen to the piano. So that piano in the background has that same motif. And what if we move on to Oblivion, for example, the 7th track, and right now the most popular of the LP. Let's fast forward a bit. Listen to the square lead on top. It's very, very in the background, but it is there. And then it's going to repeat once again in Sector 5. There it is, in the music box. That's one of them, right? And here it is in Let Me Scotta once again. The piano. So it's in different keys, different rhythms, but the notes are the same. And what if we go into the final track, Finale? There it is. But this way we are switching, we are evolving towards a more, towards a melody that feels more like it's going to finalize the whole album, a more conclusive motif. So it finally all resolves, slows down the tempo. It goes into this very huge cinematic part. And this is just like a one-off melody to end the whole album with a very, very good taste in your mouth. On your ears, rather. There it is once again in that square. And it ends in E major. happy ending, right? I'm going to talk about the happy ending in just a second. Do you have a favorite No Limits LP song? Yes, I do, and that is Sector 5. Because it's one of those songs that turned out exactly the way I wanted it to. So like, I made the sounds for it, and it instantly just felt like it works, right? So it's one of those things that just works first try. Right, and you just feel that huge feeling of satisfaction, and you just don't care about anything else. You just like that track because it happened exactly the way you wanted it to. Although from then till now, that's 3 wrong pronouns, by the way. From then till now, I've come a long way. So maybe if I were to remake Sector 5 right now, it would probably be with a lot better sound design, but who knows? Maybe at some point you will see a No Limits Remixes LP. I'll have to talk it out with the Rushdown crew about that. But yeah, and to finalize this part of the stream before we move on to our final part, motifs don't necessarily need to be just melodies. Let's take, for example, the New Year Protocol series. What about the first one? I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about the story behind NYP also in just a second. But the motif here is actually a pattern, and it's the drop. Let's move it over here. We are Modus. So this chord, this set of chords is E, E7, and then D. E, E7, D. E, E7, D. It's like that all the time. Like that all the time. And then here at the end we have G major and then A major. So that way I end the whole 8-bar phrase, right? Well, that repeats itself in the second one, for example. Final phrase. And in the third one as well. Let's go. And in the fourth one, it's all the same. Right here. It all has its like share of very small twists, but in essence it's the same thing. And in the fifth one as well, which is the latest one so far, which is here. It is the same concept, just in a different tempo with different sounds, but in essence, it's the exact same pattern. Will it repeat in NYP6 when it comes out in January 2021? Probably. So, after all that, let's go for a more global overview of the composition / tension control. So, after that, let's, now, I want you to look at this image. This is a story arc. This is what a lot of, for example, Hollywood movies used to keep you hooked into the action, right? So they start with an exposition where they establish the overall tone of the movie. Then you encounter a series of events that makes the action rise until it reaches the climax some point after the middle, right? And from there, it all goes back down falling action until you reach the resolution. But note how the resolution is a little bit higher up than the start, because when you go to the cinema, for example, and it's the first time you're going to see that movie, you have almost no idea what to expect. But when you come out of the theater after a happy ending, you walk out of there with a smile on your face. You're happy it all ended well, and that makes you feel more energetic, hence the importance of a happy ending. So, what if we take this concept and we extrapolate it into music? Well, we get a very similar thing. This song starts by establishing all the different motifs that are going to show up throughout the rest of the song. That's in the intro and the first build-up. Then the first drop and the breakdown are specific points in the plot that help rise the action before it's fully released in a huge blast of energy at the end with the second drop. With the absolutely ginormous superstars there and a lead that's doing a melody in 2 octaves instead of one, unlike in previous sections, making it all the more full, right? That's until we reach the resolution, which shares the same sounds as the exposition. But by this point, you feel something has changed. You already have a global overview of the whole thing. You're not feeling the same level of uncertainty that you felt at the beginning. You are instead feeling like it's gonna end, but you don't want it to end. The funniest thing about this is this level of psychology in music is not new. It has been done for decades by now. Cinematic music has exploited these narrative arcs to the absolute limit, and we can see that in movies like Star Wars, for example, where every character is assigned a unique melody for them and just for them when they appear on screen. And when something happens to them, that motif goes through a series of changes that represent that character's evolution over the course of the movie. And what I did here was just take that concept and try to apply it to my own style, but not just for individual songs. Instead, I've done it for my music project as a whole. And it works. AU5's Divinorum LP did just that. Xylan's We Are Dust did just that. I've given it a shot myself with my own LP, No Limits, as you've seen, but most importantly with the Near Protocol series, both of which I've already talked about just a few minutes ago. For those of you who don't know, I have this yearly series of songs I started in 2016 called New Year Protocol, which tells the story of a battle between an all-knowing rogue artificial consciousness known as the Protocol, originally created by an advanced human civilization to explore the mysteries of the universe that ultimately failed to keep it under control. And now, the successors of that civilization have to fight the machine in order to bring balance to the world. But this story was so ambitious that I just couldn't make it all fit into a single song. So I split it into chapters. And every year in January, I release a new song for that series. This has pretty much turned into the most important event every year in my whole music world. And it has become a staple of my style. So it usually comes with a special a countdown stream on Twitch, and recently even an ARG, so people can interact with the protocol itself and the characters involved and solve the riddles. And it's still going. The 6th chapter is coming next year. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this requires a huge amount of extra work on your part. But in order to make an impact these days, you have to be willing to go the extra mile. And this brings me to the final part of the Spotlight event. So, your song is done. You've exported it. You're proud of it. Congratulations, but we haven't reached the end. You still have the most important part ahead of you. You have to draw a release path. Where are you going to release it? Is it going to be a self-release or with a label? Which stores are you going to distribute it to? Are you going to send to any promo channels on YouTube, DSG, Airwave? I don't know. Are you going to submit to playlists on Spotify? Promotion is something that's often overlooked, and when it's well executed, it can help you and your brand a lot more. Now, this might make you wonder, why do some artists grow faster than others? And before you think it's a dumb question, it's not. It's a perfectly valid one, but the answer is a little bit more complicated than just better promotion. I would say there's 2 possible answers to that. The first one, which is more common, is the relationship between time and money. When marketing your music, you'll find that these are inversely proportional to each other, meaning that the more time you spend on crafting your style and improving at it means you'll have to invest less money on getting your music out there. But at the same time, if you spend more money on promotion, you will need less time to make a name for yourself because it's gonna get pushed down people's throats. You're seeing this with pop artists all the time. They make a one-hit wonder and suddenly they appear to blow up. But lest we forget, there's probably some big money and Men in Black involved in that. in my case, I have yet to spend a single penny in promo, but in order to get to where I am, it's taking me 6 years, and I'm still hard at work. Only now have I started to craft a proper marketing plan, and with all the upcoming projects I have on the horizon, it's still a bit tricky to keep up. Right, so I've come to a point where I have such a huge backlog that right now I'm releasing stuff that I made months ago, but you have to have something in store. I made the great mistake of starting out my SoundCloud profile with absolutely no material whatsoever and no previous experience. Safe to say, I was stuck for the first 2 years because I just didn't cut it. So you also really have to plan out what you're going to do and practice it beforehand. Case in point, whether you're willing to spend that much time in the scene or pay your way through, that's up to you. And the second one, which is a bit more rare, is when you're just a fan favorite. Maybe you published a tweet that blew up, or you became part of a meme. You did something that by sheer luck exposed you to a huge audience instantly. But we can't live our whole lives thinking that this is going to eventually happen. You can't rely entirely on that. So you have to draw a strategy. You need to think about what makes you. Anything from the specific sounds and instruments you use, your graphical style when making cover art, for example. And most important, you need to set yourself a target audience, a portion of the public based on their age, their gender, their taste for music, and the more variables, the better. That is going to enjoy your songs, add them to their playlists, download them and listen to them on repeat and create a community around that. Because let's face it, your music is not going to be for everyone. In my case, I have a Discord server that I'm extremely active in, and this is very important because it's all cool beans when you go ahead and post a teaser for a new song on your Instagram, right? But if you're not interacting any further than that with your audience, say replying to their own posts, liking their stuff and talking to them in DMs even, you're going to distance yourself so much from the rest of the world that your fans are going to feel like you are this unreachable entity, right? That's not how it works. In my honest opinion, you have to be sociable, the best version of yourself you can possibly be, because talking with your fans and engaging them in what you do makes them feel closer to you. Getting to know your music is a privilege. And if you manage to drive that point home, those fans will become super fans, and those super fans will share everything you do no matter what, because they feel a connection with you. You have grown to become more than just an artist for them. You have genuinely become their friend. And I know this all sounds very like motivational and all that, but when you see the results and you start to reap the benefits years later, because this is not something you do overnight, you need a lot of patience for this, you get this huge feeling of satisfaction unlike any other. All of that was worth it, and that is going to restart the cycle. That's what's going to keep you motivated to continue making music, and that cycle will go on for as long as you want it to. So I'd like to end this Spotlight event by saying, if you've recently been writing stories in your free time, now might be a good time to revisit them. Go ahead and build your own universe, your Big Bang, your galaxies, your stars, your planets, and when you're ready, it will start to fill itself with life. Thank you all for joining and sticking around until the very end. I've been Paul, aka Modus. Have a great night and rest of the week. And as always, until next time.